Hey guys, what's going on, friends and family? My name's Skylent, and normally we do listicles here. I try to just show off like new games or new experiences, new way to play those games. That's what we normally do here, but I kind of wanted to talk about something that's a little bit more specific to my past, or something that I'm kind of actually trying to get away from, which is going to be MMOs and MMO reviews, and really that whole conversation. I kind of wanted to just throw out my perspective as somebody who's done a ton of first impressions, played basically every MMO out there, and somebody who's really been attacked for playing certain games, sometimes too long, where it's like, oh, you're biased because you played too long. You know, you're obviously a fan. To, not obviously, like, oh man, you only played an hour? How can you tell it's garbage if you only played for an hour? So I kind of wanted to just unravel that. Let's unpack that conversation and let's have a dialogue in the comments below, you keyboard warriors, and let's just nip this in the bud. Okay, so very quickly, arbitrarily, the way I like to see games is, I do actually think about the dollar per hour of, no, not played, but dollar per hour of enjoyment, of actual education, of actual stimulation. A lot of people will be like, oh, I played, Warframe for 1,000 hours. It's cool that I spent $500 in it, $2 an hour, bro. Dude, how many hours of that was genuinely actual gameplay? An actual new gameplay, an actual gameplay that evoked any emotion in you whatsoever, other than, stimulating your addiction. And that's a big problem with MMOs, is they are there to stimulate your addiction and just kind of keep you playing. Just, the dailies and all that stuff, the timers, the weekly resets, blah, blah, blah. We know. Yeah. So, when it comes to MMOs, I'm actually more picky, despite the fact that they give us so many hours of game time. No, I'm sorry. I'm even significantly more picky on repetitious content. So that's just me, personally, my bias. But the way I look at things is I would appreciate if a game is fully reviewable and playable in around 60 hours. Because, I don't know, it just works real nice like that, mathematically. AAA games tend to be $60, and actually, if I look at my Steam, when it comes to every Souls game, and every, AAA full-featured game that has multiple, game modes or multiple ways of playing or some form of replayability, it's 60 hours, just about, with Horizon Zero Dawn, assuming, you play on the highest difficulties, Dark Souls, every one has been just about 60 hours, where I go and do all the online content, or like Call of Duty or Halo, where it's like, okay, you play the multiplayer, you play the campaign on the hardest difficulty, you do the co-op mode, and you do like the, this mode or whatever. When you really fully play a game, it kind of feels like 60 hours is when it's like, okay, I've got an understanding of what this is about. I've been there, I've done it. And you know what? Yeah, no, you could do a full review, and I think that's where a lot of reviewers kind of cut their review. It's at 60 hours, and that just makes a lot of sense for a AAA game. Now, in saying that, I think a lot of us can agree with normal games. Normal titles, 60 hours does probably feel really good, around there maybe. But how many of you who've played an MMO could be like, okay, Can you review World of Warcraft in 60 hours? Can you review Guild Wars 2 in 60 hours? Oh, wait, no, we're getting somewhere. Maybe you could. Guild Wars 2 might be unique. Final Fantasy 14? No. PlanetSide 2? Yes. So there's definitely give and take. But clearly, the standout MMOs, like the ones that I actually championed in my list video recently of like best MMO to jump in and jump out, those games are designed to be kind of like paired, or like they're B MMO, or they're not games that are meant to just be like spammed nonstop every day. Like, yeah, you could just play PlanetSide 2, you have full access basically to the full game instantaneously. It's awesome. Guild Wars 2 as well. You could just jump in and do a bunch in 60 hours. You're going to be doing a whole bunch. Like, I think you can one and done the game as if it was a AAA title in 60 hours. But games like World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy 14, and especially like a lot of Asian games, no, probably not. Probably could. And a lot of people, even if you did technically do every feature, like Black Desert Online, in 60 hours, you can get really far in 60 hours. But a lot of people would still be like, you need 200 hours to fully review Black Desert Online. Because the game is so grindy and there's like a lot of little nuances that kind of make certain mechanics and things. And it's, you know what? I don't know, we can talk about specific MMOs, and there's gonna be give and take, for sure. Let's admit that, there's give and take. Okay, the context is like everyone's favorite word, but in the end, I think we can admit most MMOs, 60 hours is almost laughable, and I do get laughed at. I spent a week on my Black Desert Online review, which is actually a pretty straightforward game, and people were like, dude, what, 8 hours a day for a week? That's not enough. You're such a noob, and I guess I am. But is that my fault? Or is that when we can start to get into the faults of the game? If you can play for 60 hours and still not understand mechanics, like at all, or there's things that are hidden, or they're like so nuanced, or everything is, there's still things that are very uncomfortable, it's like, I don't know, at that point, maybe it's not a player's fault. Especially a player who specifically plays games not just to play them, but I game games. I reached Masters in Overwatch. I play, titles like Dark Souls because they are difficult. I try to be good at games. So it's specifically the MMO genre where I hit wall after wall of like, wait, I'm confused. Wait, I should have known this, when I was level 10. This mechanic has been here the whole time. Why didn't I ever know this? Why didn't I ever uncover this? Like, there's so many things where it's like, man, MMOs kind of don't teach you how to play, and yet at the same time, they oversimplify themselves and they hold your hand. It's like, developers don't know how MMO players really play their games. It's just like they teach you the basic fundamental mechanics for like 200 hours, and then they just throw you into the pit of hell that is endgame. And that's a tragedy. So anyways, got that out of the way, 6 minutes in, we all know that. That's just kind of how MMOs are. But how fast, how quickly can you actually review an MMO? 30, let's say 30 hours. Let's move in. Yeah, it's going to be games, I guess, like Vermintide or Left 4 Dead or Deep Rock Galactic. These titles which have basically one game mode, and they just kind of do that one thing, and it is a hyper-repetitious content, but with a lot of nuance and a lot of fun or maybe some progression mechanics that really go into it, and it's about playing with friends or what have you. So these are games that are a little bit more, they do that thing. Survival games are a lot like this, Valheim, stuff like that. These are the titles that in 30 hours, you can really be like, okay, we played this over the weekend, it was a freaking blast, awesome adventure, good time, let's do a review, and that's fine. You obviously haven't done all of the content, but you've done a lot, and you've done good, and I think most people would say, okay, that was probably a good review, and they would agree with most of what you said. Now, again, could you imagine doing a 30-hour review for MMOs? Now, maybe we would have to go down to micro MMOs, maybe like PlanetSide 2 or Realm of the Mad God, or maybe some kids, MMOs. But again, for the most part, no way in hell would a lot people, again, those are people who play those MMOs though. They would be like, oh nah, man, you can't do that. And then go, okay, $10 games, 10 hours. Can you do that? Smaller and smaller size of MMOs that people would just be okay with you spending only 10 hours in the MMO. But at the same time, I think a lot of us, we do watch first impressions because one, we admit, okay, yeah, it would be unreasonable to do a full review on an MMO. And then, another third of us would say, well, it's impossible to do a full review on an MMO. And then the other third is like, well, honestly, you can kind of tell instantaneously. And so that's where I'm going. I think the quickest that you can technically, and I'm going to say objectively, review an MMO is actually 0 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds of in-game time. So yeah, that's where the rest of the rant video is. Of course, I got to put that Skylent spin on it, where I'm like, actually, let's do something you think is impossible. How many times have I reviewed an MMO without ever playing it? Much more than you guys probably realize. I've done it constantly, and some of my biggest videos are me entirely just talking about a game without ever playing it. And that's because the name of the genre is MMO. It is very clear, you can quickly see, especially if it's on Steam. If you go on Steam, okay, just as an example, and an MMO has 0 players, then is it an MMO? Is it worth your time actually playing the game? And that's just it. That's it. That just ends the argument. Objectively right there, you can immediately tell if an MMO is good, great. You can actually even have variability in it. Is it a 9 out of 10? You can probably even get some specific like that based on what they say the type of game is, where it's like, okay, this is let's say like a world PvP type of game. And if it has near 0 players, then that is a 1 out of 10, right? That is not a worthwhile no, that's not gonna work. You can't do that kind of stuff. And you can clearly see games like, if an MMO isn't updating as much, there's no, commercials or things like that. Or like, just as an example, like if you had a fighting game and the fighting game never had any tournaments and it had no players online, then you call those a Discord fighter. Because you have to specifically find people who want to play this weird ancient or niche fighting game, and then find them on Discord and then match up with them. It's a whole arduous thing, and that's gonna happen with MMOs. Basically, it's like the MMO kind of becomes a Discord MMO, or it's like a game that you just play with some friends and co-op through it. but obviously it's not designed or balanced for that in mind. Obviously, the game is supposed to be a living world, it's supposed to have consistent updates, it's supposed to have a large population, and specifically with different genres, you know, like if it's a dungeon diving MMO, maybe you can get away with that. Like WildStar. WildStar could have actually have kept on going. It wasn't that unpopular. It could have worked. But games like Mortal Online, games like Darkfall, you know, stuff and things like that, hell no, man. No, you need a population, you need consistent updates, you need consistent events. Fuck, no, man, it's not gonna work. So you can actually clearly review an MMO from that. Another thing is that you can clearly see in some cases, you know, again, being an MMO, being an online game, similar to fighting games or many other titles, if you can clearly see tremendous frame drops, you know, lag spikes in the official trailers, if you can see these kind of things, or you go onto the website and there's translation errors everywhere and stuff like that, there's subtle things that you can totally see that will ruin your MMORPG experience. I mean, if you can't properly read a story, I don't know, how RPG is it? Or whatever, you know? And how MMO is it gonna be? How fun is it gonna be if people are, like, literally in Darkfall's trailer, there's a player who just falls through the ground. I cannot fucking believe that. So anyways, how are you gonna trust a game like that, right? So it's totally okay if someone goes into a game with bias, and even before you even play the game, if a game is super arbitrary, like and weird and arduous, just trying to sign up and log in, looking at you, Final Fantasy XI, what the fuck? So if you have these kind of systems in place where it's like before you even get into the game, it's like you gotta make 2 different accounts and link them together, and then, I don't know, make 10 different passwords and with hieroglyphics, I don't know. No, man, you could begin to review the MMO experience before even playing an MMO. That was actually the subject of a recent rant video. You can kind of get a feel of what the MMO will probably be based on the community the developer builds, because that's actually how communities work. The developer makes the communities. They get the type of people that they want, the champions that they need for the game that they're designing. So that's why I try to have a Garden of Thorns style, you know, community where it's like, you guys hate me, I hate you, or really we're just all very critical of everything, and we're looking at things with a sharper eye, magnifying glass, right? And that's fun. That's great. We want better games, especially with this genre MMOs, kind of being mediocre. Maybe it's not great, maybe it's not awful, but it's really just kind of average. When originally it was all about these big epic ideas and dreams and doing things that no one's ever done before, and yet it is now very much the opposite of just doing the same thing every day in a bunch of different games that pretty much look the same, and that's quite the tragedy. So yeah, am I allowed to play a game and do a first impressions and just, you know, I could just ramble off and be like, oh, this UI is boring, oh, this ability is boring, oh yeah, you know, I'm seeing the trend here, even though they haven't gotten to the end game. It's very clear. We can see that the patterns, we can see what we've seen before. We know, okay? We can't pretend that over the horizon there's gonna be some epic, awesome kaiju fight. You know, we can see pretty instantaneously. And sometimes that's wrong. You know, sometimes our biases can be proven wrong, which is actually the case with games like Guild Wars 2. Awesome game that does over the horizon have many features and contents that you guys should really play. Quite, I think, a pinnacle of many MMO design philosophies. But at the same time, you know, if some people quit, I can't blame you, because most MMOs really do suck. But in a lot of ways, in the I guess the worst case scenario, if you want to say, but in ways the best case scenario for, you know, how quickly can you review an MMO? Technically, it's 0 seconds. You can just see, is this a massively populated game? No, it's got like 10 players. Does it need a massive population to be an MMO? Not always, actually. I think it can't. Some games can be playable. But again, you know, certain situations, the type of game that it is this a game that's based on a player economy, you know, on PvP and stuff like that, and there's only 10 players? How much of an MMO is it? How good is it really? You know, stuff like that. Is this an end game rating, you know, co-op style game, and then it has had no updates for 10 years? How good is it then, really? So yeah, I think, yeah, it's 0. I think let people do their first impressions. Let people fire off their, even if it is a misconception, let people say that, because it is a job of the game that you are playing to teach you how to play, to show you what it has available, to reveal itself to you, to get you excited, and to keep the hype alive. So yeah, that is something that you can criticize. Even if they are wrong in their assessment, it is that revelation that actually says some things about the game itself, I think. So That's what I gotta say about, my career reviewing MMOs and stuff like that. And it's something that I've seen echoed from my peers as well. But that's pretty much it. It's your turn, keyboard warriors. Let me know in the comments below. But much love. I'll see you in the next one.